adequate as I do.
I do. We agree again.
They're amazing young performers.
We're so proud of them.
You
So
have
proud.
every reason to be.
Thank you both again so much for joining us and for sharing kind of some of your thoughts about why the performing arts not only matter, but affect how we live, how we interact with one another, and how we achieve social justice ends. So I thought I would kind of just start, and Justice Sotomayor kind of just ask, how did you kind of develop an interest in music? Where did that kind of come from? How do you kind of see music? Do you have a favorite type of music?
Well, my first exposure to music was Spanish music. It was growing up in the home, and both my mother and my grandmother and my father were poets who said their poetry to music. And so on Saturday nights, when my family got together to have a party, there were always two essential ingredients, three. Good food, a lot of rum, and music and poetry. And that was the ingredients for me of the vibrancy of life, because both my grandmother and my father brought those words to life through the music. I didn't understand half the words. I was too little to follow the sophisticated poetry that they were singing. But nevertheless, I was moved by it. And it continued throughout my life. As I grew into my teenage years, it was Motown. As I grew from there, it became, and more sophisticated yet, it was jazz. And as I've grown older, I still like those things. I've gotten an ear for opera through friends. We share a few in common, including the one that you'll hear shortly, Carla. But I have always thought that music is what moves us. Think of when important moments in your life, the Star-Spangled Banner. You feel patriotism when you hear it. You go out to a ball game, go out to a baseball game, and that song moves you to get up and cheer your team. But there are songs of all kinds that call us to do things. My colleague, who I never worked with, but I now step in for him after he left the court, Justice Marshall, Thurgood Marshall, not John Marshall. Used to, on Law Day, have them play the Battle Hymn of the Republic. And every time I'm there for Law Day with middle schoolers, and they play that song, I think of him, because I knew how much he loved it. And I bet everyone here has a memory of a moment with music, because it infuses everything we do.
Justice Baer, how has music kind of played a role in your life? How has it impacted you?
I have to admit that I'm more of a consumer and an eclectic latecomer to music. I had the privilege to be exposed to both classical music and jazz by my parents, but it was kind of difficult to get to that at a young age, I have to admit. But then I started, in particular, and I think it's a different take really on it, admiring the performers. I so admire people who can do that, because I'm utterly unable to do anything of the kind. And I so am in awe seeing the beauty of the multiplicity of human expression in music and started listening to all kinds, whatever I could get a hold of, enjoying the variety in it. So it's very much about the ability of people to give that not only to me, but to space, to have something enter the world which is beyond what I usually work with, words and text. And so the admiration always drove me. And when I go to court these days in the morning, I listen to what one might elaborately call strong female vocalists. But in fact, it's pretty contemporary and it's pretty pop, and I love it because it's empowering to me. I love it partly because it's way beyond my abilities ever, but it's also because these people speak to me on levels and in dimensions where other things can never ever reach me. So there's something which gives me a certain flow or energy in life, but a pretty eclectic consumer.
I often tell audiences, I'm a lawyer because I can't sing, dance, or draw.
I'm with you on that one. Yeah.
My question is for Justice Baer first. Do you feel that the arts are viewed and valued differently between the two societies, and if so, why do you think that might be?
It is a very difficult question, because maybe I may not know enough about the American society. What I can say about my own is that the arts are not the other planet, but part of a civic life and culture. There is no, moderately big, and when we're talking big, you're talking really small, city in Germany which is not proud to have its own theater, permanently employed orchestra, permanently employed players on stage, artists, which is just something taxpayers are willing to fund. And I'm not romanticizing in saying it's as important as a soccer team, because that in Germany would really drive it very far. But it is, a source of, that's who we are. And it's kind of not taken for granted, but appreciated as part of who we are. And what I like about it is that there's at least the attempt to not have it be an elite enterprise, but have it part of the communities, the notion of citizenship. It belongs to enjoy something, to see beauty in things, but to also have these interrupting moments. Art is also always something which cities risk to disturb their assumptions of normalcy, of order. So that's why I love music, particularly doing law usually, because there's something inherently disorderly about the arts and about making me rethink and making me hesitate a little bit and making me what? Surprise me. That is really important to this. So it's also a generous gesture of communities, cities, taxpayers, governments, to say, yeah, art is part of us, because art will never kind of totally play along. Art will never be totally well behaved, or at least then I don't consider it very interesting. But so there's something which we at least cherish as really important, but important as part of it and not on another scale there. So that's, I think,
Now, what's fascinating to me is we don't have generally public support of the arts. You have it in an institution like this one. You have it in the Kennedy Center, which is a public arts center. But most cities fund their art through the generosity of the public in the United States.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating to me is that in that generosity, we have support for so many different art forms. It is not just the opera or the symphonies and ballets, both the modern and the classical. You have it in the venues and different kinds that are all over New York City and almost every city of the country. And so, no, we don't support it publicly the way Germany does, but I think that we have in part of our civic responsibility a sense of private support that is probably unparalleled in the rest of the world. We don't rely on tax dollars. We rely on the love of art as part of our civic responsibility. And to me, that's almost as important.
We agreed earlier that we usually prefer a mix. So in this case, because I admire the generosity of people and the variety that is sponsored, I really do. And I think the creativity which is allowed for by this activity is amazing. And yet I also know about how much artists appreciate the longue durée of constant flows of money.
Yes.
And they're not,
Amen to that.
you know, asking again. So it's both.
Definitely. And on a similar continuum for Justice Sotomayor, these artists that we heard earlier today and the ones we'll still get to hear, what do you think are some of the most important things that they can do now in this day and age to make their art form relevant to their respective communities?
A much more difficult question.
I saved it.
No, it is, because relevancy is in the eye of the hearer, seer, and of the specific community that you're in. I just heard about your choruses singing of the last words.
7 last words.
You could not find something more pertinent to the nation's conversation on the interactions between youth and police than that creation. And I think that's wonderful. But I also think that having unstructured art be a part of what the community is looking at and experiencing is equally relevant. I don't know that the arts have to seek out a role. It is their given right. Think about, there is no community that exists without it, and none that will actually exist without it in the future. So I don't know that there's a particular thing that they can do. I am worried for artists because of the nature of artistic creation today. So much of it involving new technology, and our societies have not kept up with how to protect that art. Music today is a very different enterprise than music was 20, 30, even 10 years ago. And how much artists can earn is being constrained by the freedom of technology. And so there are things to worry about, I think, more than there are the idea that you will be relevant or not. I think you'll always be relevant. How we can support artists is going to be a different question.
Absolutely.
How do you see, and to both of you, but how do you see the law affected by or interacting with the performing arts, directly or indirectly?
Badly.
We had a case the other day. First time in the life of the court, we played rap music in the courtroom. And we very rarely hear a case. And we played the music because we had a case to decide what the rights of the creators of the music are or the users of the music are to produce new music. I mean, you know, a classic.
Fair use questions.
Fair use questions. It was extremely interesting because all the justices felt so differently challenged in dealing with this new medium in the room. This, what does it? It did something. I think the whole room was a different kind of thing at the moment. We, as usual, came out with the wisest judgment ever. You can read it. slightly biased. But there is a lot of direct interaction, and there are attempts, I think, to really, and that's the pleasure in law, to really engage with what is going on there and to acknowledge that it is difficult to understand what is going on because of the technology, because of our very changed conceptions of ownership, property, etc., because of ways of getting messages or creativity across. So there's a very direct way of interacting there, and at the same time, it's always the other side of the coin. Law hinders art in certain circumstances. Law is a barrier to artistic creativity, or can be a barrier to artistic creativity. So law has to be taken up by us and the arts community to engage in a discussion of what kind of rule framing art can take and how much rule bending we will allow for law to survive. So it cuts both ways.
The courts are the slowest moving in the field of intellectual property. If you read a Supreme Court decision or decisions, you will find us pronouncing in grandiose terms some fundamentally important rights when it comes to intellectual property law, at least in the United States. I don't know about in Germany, but in the United States, we move like turtles. We are slow in declaring protections. We are slow in moving with technology, in part because we are very much afraid of whatever we do stepping on creativity.
Right.
And so the law follows the arts always. And I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing, but I do think in the speed with which society is moving in intellectual property creation, that can be of detriment to the creative souls who are looking to make some money from it. Because we're slow in recognizing new forms of art as new forms, and we're slow in granting rights that can stop others from using that new tool. And so it's a fine line for us in the legal profession.
And in these processes, the performing arts, when
Have all of you seen Hamilton? It's the first rap music I ever understood.
Oh no, Will Smith.
May I insert an additional remark?
Absolutely.
Because there's a potential in the arts which goes beyond the immediate production of the arts, which is, whether it's Hamilton or anything else, you can talk to lawyers about art. You can bring to us slow beings, courts, legislatures, etc., a message about the complexity, the needs, the creativity, the potential of the arts. Sometimes this is brought by, I think, players reading things to audiences. I heard about that. And what I want to emphasize is that the arts is more than performing and enjoying. The arts is also about talking to audiences which you would ordinarily maybe not meet, and audiences who would maybe ordinarily not listen to you as a citizen. And it goes hand in hand. Arts is never only the product, but I consider it always a Gesamtkunstwerk. That is not a term in English, I think.
All right, I can't help you.
But something where there's always already people involved who can combine their artistic expression with something which they care for and reach out way beyond what we usually reach out to.
It touches the human soul.
Yeah.
It can.
And I think there's so many of our students who want to be able to bring their voice, their artistic voice, to the things that they care about, the societal things that they care about, that often are bounded by legalities and legal structures. And so I think them having that understanding of that it really does impact the law, and what they bring to a stage or to a community really can have an impact.
A tremendous impact. I know that some of my most deeply thought views on the justice system were a product of a play where Steve Bright of the Innocence Project just had actors reading trial transcripts of people who had been exculpated through DNA and other evidence. And watching that performance one night, I think I was the only judge in the audience, moved me to think more broadly about the impact of our criminal justice system and how it interacts with members of our society. And it took that performance to sort of give me an insight that all of my reading had not.